All right, let's explore sexuality in terms of how we experience it on various levels, each and every day. We live in a sexually ingrained culture that puts sexuality at a very high premium in terms of how sex is communicated and how often. Culture teaches us about sex probably more than human beings in our life. Now, the question I have is, do you and are you aware of each and every day we live in a sexual world where we grade one another, we're attracted to one another, we sometimes flirt with one another, and we engage in relationships of varying degrees of intensity that are all centered around, in some way, shape, or form, or overlap our sexuality. We have to start to learn and be aware of those things probably on a more consistent basis. Sexual thoughts run through a man's mind moment by moment by moment, thousands of them per week. It's amazing how sexually charged we are as a culture, but how we're wired individually as sexual beings. So that begs the question, how do we experience our sexuality and on what levels do we experience them in everyday life? Well, we just have the general interaction with other people that on some level overlaps with our sexuality. But do you have personal boundaries when it comes to sexuality? Do your boundaries move? In other words, are they circumstantial? Are there certain circumstances in which you find yourself, certain settings or locations where sexuality becomes more permissive in your own mind? You're more curious, you're more flamboyant. Maybe it's a club or a bar, or when you're intoxicated, you change the boundaries of your sexuality. That's something to be aware of. The second thing is, are there different seasons of your life when it seems to be more appropriate to be in the midst of a sexual exploration? College, marriage, when you're elderly, even when you're a teenager. Different seasons of life tend to, culturally speaking, define for us the acceptability of sexual exploration. Some of us are into casual hookup relationships. Is that a boundary that moves for you? Is that acceptable for you? Let's begin to pinpoint exactly where you are in terms of personal boundaries and sexuality. Some have friends with benefits, sexual relationship that asks nothing of the other person from an emotional standpoint. It's simply, or intended simply, to be a physical relationship. Is that you? That is a boundary that you've set. You've redefined your boundary over time. It is circumstantial. Some have ongoing dating relationships in which sexuality takes place in the context of a monogamous or a not so monogamous dating relationship. Maybe some people take it to the next level, and that is a monogamous dating relationship. Others graduate to, or what they feel is a graduation towards, sex in the context of living together, and then others eventually, although put off later in life more and more as we go, is marriage itself. Even within marriage, some are monogamous and some are not. So we all have these different levels of sexual acceptability. The purpose of this video is to get you to begin to hone in on what is acceptable to you, what is your starting point in which you're going to evaluate your behavior, your intentions, your respect for yourself and for others, and are you purposely and intentionally managing your sexuality in a way that is being beneficial to you or perhaps even destructive? They happen on various levels, sometimes simultaneously. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Let's define where you are in that whole spectrum. And as these videos progress, you'll begin to see, you know what? I hadn't thought about that particular thing, or I hadn't thought about how sex or the absence of sex in my life actually affects different areas of my life. Where is it you want to be? And are you willing to think objectively about a new destination should you be in a place you don't necessarily want to be? Let's consider that as you move through these videos in the great sex section of Lifepoints.